All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ariel Kennan. I'm a fellow at the Beeck Center, and I'm also your moderator for this session. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's FormFest 2023 session titled No Coding Needed, Empowering Teams to Build Digital Forms. In this 1 hour session, our speakers will present first, and we will save the last 20 minutes for questions and answers. If you have a question during the question or Q&A period, please use the chat box, and we will moderate the questions out loud so that the recording captures the question and answer. Let's get started, and I'll turn the session over to our colleagues at the Canadian Digital Service, including Carolyn Connors, Sam Sadasivan, and Tim Arney, who are going to be our presenters today. Take it away, you three.
There we go. Hi, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to our presentation on empowering Canadian government teams to create accessible forms. My name is Carolyn Connors. I'm a senior service designer with the Canadian Digital Service, and I will be kicking things off. It's so nice to see everyone joining us today. Feel free to use the chat to say hi and let us know where you're joining from. I'm dialing in from the beautiful province of Nova Scotia. Before we get into things, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about who we are. We work at the Canadian Digital Service amongst a team of about 120 plus people. We've come together with a common goal, that government services should be simple to use for everyone. Our mandate is to empower government teams to serve people better, and we do this through dedicated teams who work with awesome people across all levels of our Canadian government. I'd also like to introduce you to our GC Forms dedicated team. GC Forms kicked off discovery research in April of 2020. Then, of course, COVID hit and momentum slowed down. When I joined the team in February of 22, discovery research and an MVP had been completed, and there were 7 members on the team. Since then, we've been steadily growing, and you can see now the team pictured here of 18. Today, I'd like to showcase a real rarity within government, the most truly agile team that I have ever met. Along the way, you'll hear about our work on GC Forms and how the team upholds agile principles to get things done. Today's presenters are Tim Arney, one of our principal developers, Sam Sadasivan, a service designer on the team focused on UI and interaction design, and myself, a member of the team focused on user research and service design. Tim's going to tell you the story of how new members joining the team accelerated progress to create a self-service experience. Sam will walk you through the iterative process of building multilingual interface that supports a multilingual form. And I'll follow this up with how getting to a protected information status lets us build incrementally with features driven by user feedback. We'll have time at the end for questions and answers. We've already kind of gone over that. Just throw your questions in the chat, and we'll take the time at the end to talk about what you have, what's burning on your brain. So before we get into that, I'm sure you'd all like to see what GC Forms can do. So here's a video of Stevie Ray, GC Forms product manager, showing how you can publish forms in under 5 minutes.
Hey FormFest, thanks for joining us and welcome to GC Forms. The problem we're here to solve is represented by this user quote from a service owner in a large department. Basically, by the time their form is up, sometimes 6 months later, we already have changes to it. There isn't currently a great way to publish forms quickly and easily in the Government of Canada. And so let's go through this demo as a program team that needs to get feedback on the accessibility of their product or service so that they can build an equitable service. And we'll go through this demo, get from 0 to live in about 5 minutes. So if we start on the GC Forms landing page, you can learn a little bit more or get started. You can get started without an account. You'll just need one when you start to publish your form or want to collect that data. And at that point, we'll need information from you, your name, Government of Canada email address, and some security questions. So if you have to reset your password, then we'll know that it's actually you. And at this point, we are sending a second factor authentication code to the federal government email address that you provided. This lets us know that you still have that email address and haven't moved on, in which case you probably shouldn't have access to the data that your form is collecting anymore. We let folks know a little bit about their responsibilities for using the product, and then they can start to build their forms. So let's create a new form. You can design from scratch or open from a previous file, which I'll show in just a little bit here. And once we get into the what you see is what you get editor, you can see that there are ways to add form components. And there are also these locked blocks, which basically mean that you have to complete these to publish your form. You're going to need a title, a privacy statement, and a confirmation message. You can add individual questions, short answers, drop-downs, and there are also some kind of government-specific questions like a legal attestation. And we try and make it a little bit easier for folks by taking some of the content design burden off of them by providing pre-made blocks of questions for the most commonly asked questions from a government form, like what is your address? For these pre-made blocks, we have all of the content in English, and we also have the content pre-translated in French for them. My colleague Sam will talk about how we created this side-by-side translation view and how you can integrate it with other processes in the government through this spreadsheet. Once we've moved on from editing, we can see how our form looks with it were to be published in this test view. And we can come to our settings page to decide how we want to send that form data or collect that form data. You can get it via email, or if you're collecting information like, say, a social insurance number or something that should not be sent via email, we allow you to download the form responses within GC Forms. So let's go back to that original user story of trying to get feedback on the accessibility of our product. Not only do we have those pre-made blocks like the address, we also have some templates, and you can download that on the landing page in the templates section. And at that point, you can open up that form file that we provided you with, basically a JSON schema. And here we've got a pre-made form template that will collect accessibility feedback, and we can see what that form will look like when published. So if we head over to the publish view, we have some checkboxes here to make sure that you have the questions, that they are translated, and that you have a confirmation message. So if I click publish here, we get a link in French and English, and here we are live. So the form itself uses responsive design. So if we're filling this out on mobile or on tablet, it will change according to the screen size that we're using. And let's go through this as a person who's actually experiencing an accessibility barrier. Let's say that they ran into a keyboard trap on the site that they were on, and they would like us to get back to them. They can use the autofill information here and submit the form. So here we see the confirmation message that was sent. And if we go back to GC Forms, we can go to our form here and go to our response page. And here we have the document that is the form submission that we just provided there, which Carolyn will talk a little bit more about that design process and how we tested with users to check our assumptions. But for now, back to the team, and thanks for joining us again.
So I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty cool. I'm now going to pass things off to Tim, and he's going to talk you through how we went from the idea to the reality of self-serve.
Thanks, Carolyn. Getting our service to the point where we can demo 0 to Live in 5 was a big milestone for us. Of course, it took a lot to get there. So let's talk a little bit about how we went from where we were to self-serve in under 4 months. So prior to the creation of a form builder, forms were handcrafted. We jokingly referred to this as Stevie Ray as a service. He was a product manager doubling as a JSON template manager. We used to say, if you need a new form, contact Stevie Ray, who would in turn create a new JSON form template. There'd be back and forth, of course, with the client. Next, the template would be copied and pasted into a text area to be uploaded, as you can see here on the left. Our admin area at that time was for internal use only. We didn't have any other types of accounts. There'll be more on that later. So finally, a published form would be ready. As you can imagine, this process was cumbersome and clearly it didn't scale. That said, it did establish a pattern for us for how to build forms. So step one of that would be creating and editing templates. Step two, sharing and reviewing. And step three was the uploading and publishing step. So if we take a look at our team's vision statement, it says quickly and easily publish. But as Stevie Ray would attest, manually editing JSON isn't quick or easy. JSON files work great for templates, but editing them by hand is too hard. All this was forecasted early on when our team met with a team from vets.gov who had already run into that same hurdle. They had advised that a viable solution would have to be low code or no code. To reach any sort of scale, we knew it was obvious that GC Forms needed a form builder. So let's put ourselves in Stevie Ray's shoes for a minute. On the right-hand side, I've pulled out a small snippet of a JSON form template. It basically contains a single element and a form title. Now picture what this could look like for a typical form where you'd have 10 or more elements, or even hundreds. Editing gets really complicated and error-prone. It's easy to place attributes in the wrong spots. So our goal was to automate the creation, editing, sharing, and uploading of these files, utilizing as much of the existing live service as possible. So we spun up a new team to look at the creation of a form builder. That team consisted of a team owner, product manager, 3 developers, and 2 designers. And as we started mapping this out, our form builder, we opted to not start with conditional logic or pagination or things like multiple addresses. We are really targeting simple forms. Pulling together a new team is hard, of course. Teams in general need a chance to bond and form relationships, no pun intended. So what's the best way to pull together a team and ideas quickly? I would recommend playing Crazy Eights, the co-design session that is, not the card game. It's okay, but not the best for team building. The Crazy Eights co-design session was a combination of Miro, paper sketches, and breakout rooms. So we were asked to fold a piece of paper in 8. There's a timer which was set for 8 minutes, and we started sketching 8 ideas, 1 per minute. After that, we could share these ideas back in a breakout room and start to combine these ideas in what would become a group designed form builder. That session really helped us narrow our vision in less than a day of work. That was really the first step for us in creating an empowered team with a rock solid scope, and it started moving us towards consensus in some areas and or focused discussion for others. It was a brilliant time saver overall. Coming out of those sessions, we had some rough sketches of what we planned to build. As you can see, it's not far off from where we ended up. These sketches basically allowed us to go back and refine the interface while allowing developers to start experimenting with code. Looking back at our form creation pattern, this would be step 1, creating and editing templates. A few weeks in, we had a rough prototype. In this early version, we could basically copy the built JSON file to the clipboard, much as Stevie Ray had in the past. We could use that existing interface to get the form templates into the database. So we could call this step 1 complete, and having this early win was great for team morale. For step 2, the sharing and reviewing process, we knew we didn't have time to set up a robust workflow within the app. So we opted for low tech here. We allowed folks to download the template as seen here, save the template to a computer, and share by emailing it to a coworker. The coworker could then visit the form builder for editing and review, no account needed, which was good because, spoiler alert, we didn't have accounts yet. On to step 3. As you may have noticed, we're essentially taking what were manual steps and automating them. The key takeaway here is building things in chunks and doing the bare minimum to make something function worked very, very well for us. To this point, all was going smooth, but of course, that's never the case when you're building a product. For self-service publishing, we knew we needed accounts. The government of Canada doesn't have a solution for unified accounts yet, so it was up to the app team to build that into the product. We had three options at this point. Pause work on the form builder itself and start working on accounts, or we could pull in the core team and have them pivot away from some work that Carolyn will speak to later. And the third option, give Stevie Ray the bad news that he would still be the JSON template manager for the foreseeable future. So, of course, we gave Stevie Ray the bad news. Kidding, of course. The core team ended up pivoting to work on accounts for us. Now let's fast forward to having completed the account sign-up flow. Our self-publishing step was now unblocked. Now folks could sign up, create, edit, and publish. Sounds like all you'd need for a form builder in Canada, right? Well, no. We needed to ensure our app was fully bilingual, as that's a requirement of the Official Languages Act in Canada. And for that, I'll pass things over to Sam. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Tim. Awesome. So in order for us to understand what minimum viable product meant for our form builder, we used research and design to help highlight requirements around security, accessibility, and specifically bilingualism. So I'm going to take you through the process of how we use secondary research to create the first prototype of our bilingual form feature, to test with users, and to iterate beyond that. So as a team, we looked at a few form builders to discuss what we can do, what we should do, and what we shouldn't do for our MVP. Building a form builder for the Government of Canada meant we needed to make it easy to create bilingual forms. From secondary research, we found a translation feature that used a table format, enabling the user to have more than 2 languages. This was a feature we knew we had to do. Even though it might not be simple, we knew we should do it. We didn't want to have an automated translation feature, as that is not how good bilingual forms are built. So in order to aid good form design in the Government of Canada, we knew we needed a translation feature that complements the existing tools and workflows. So we spoke to a translator. We spoke to Nick Cochette, a translator on our team here at CDS. And as a content expert, he's worked in departments across the Government of Canada, including embedded and federated translation teams. So with him, we dug into 2 main themes. What tools are you using, and what processes do you adhere to work as a team and to work for other teams? The main focus was around computer-assisted translation tools, or CAT tools. The translators will essentially take the source content from the original file, create a generic XML file, and plug it into a side-by-side editor with the source language on your left and the target language on your right. Then they would export the target language back into the source file. A side-by-side view was important to make sure they understood the flow and context of the source language. And then the blue tags you see here in the screenshot indicate the formatting of the text, so headers, question labels, and question options. But there was a desire here to see that formatting visually. The channels that they use to aid their processes are Slack, an online forum, and a CRM to manage translation requests coming in from different teams. Since they're not embedded on product teams, they aren't always given the context of what they're translating. Due to this, they prefer to export a copy of the original document and work in another environment to ensure they don't accidentally edit the original. We knew we needed to give the translators a way to move the content from one location to another if they didn't feel comfortable working within our interface. So for our first attempt at the layout, we focused on the interaction design and the information architecture. We used cards with text areas to chunk out the content and view the languages side by side. We showed headers, question titles, descriptions, and options, and how we showed that visually. And both sides were editable, so the structure of one content could inform the other. We also added the ability to copy the cards in order to allow translators to work in another location, because at this point, exporting was a bit bigger lift and out of scope for our first round of concept testing with public servants. But there was a lot of opportunities, and we had an interface and functionality to switch between 2 languages. We did not specify which 2 languages you wanted, and since this was MVP, I was really excited for how this could open up how forms are built based on the department's needs. So folks could build a form in French and English and then duplicate it and build it in another 2 languages. I was so excited for this idea that I mocked up a form in Inuktitut to show the range of its value in Canada. For our first round of concept testing, we tested with public servants in French, and we noticed a few bugs as well as a few usability issues. The main pain point was contrasting the 2 language toggles. The one you see in the header that changes the interface language, and then the one you see in the form preview that toggles between the source language and the target language. It will eventually look the same, but when you're building the form, it's unclear to know which one is which. Either way, we knew that we needed to make it easy to view both languages when building and previewing the form, and have the visual design look different than the toggle that changed the interface language in our header. So iterating in a pair with our amazing developer, Dave Semelenko, we came up with 2 ideas and merged them together. We use color categorization and labels as a simple approach to help tie the idea of bilingualism. We added tags to the interface to show which side was which within the side-by-side view. And we added a toggle component that specifically tied to the translation view using the same colors and labels. This would switch the content you're viewing when adding questions and when previewing your form. And during this iteration, Dave added the export spreadsheet option. This was out of scope due to complexity, as I mentioned before, but our developer knew how important this feature was for a translator's workflow, so he just made it, and I was so excited. So this is a big shout out to Dave, and also a great example of the commitment our team members have to the requirements, but also the trust we have in each other to do the work we know will help our users. So adding in the toggle and the tags meant that we made the interface specified to the user that we're supporting French and English only. This was something I was definitely trying to think around, but in the end, this was MVP, and we wanted to follow our commitment to the requirements set around bilingual forms in the Government of Canada. However, there is much room in the interface and in the process to improve and build in these options later. We were able to sneak in exporting a spreadsheet, but importing a spreadsheet was still a feature that we needed to investigate. So whilst this is not a common pattern, having export without import, we were able to better serve the need of allowing translators to export a copy and continue their workflow in another space without fear of accidentally changing the original. This bilingual translation feature isn't common in other form builders, so we don't know if it's perfect. Right now, we know it works for our users. In a couple months or weeks, it might not. So it's comforting to know that we have processes that allow for change as our users' needs inevitably change. So deciding what to iterate on and how it is an intentional practice requires us to actively solicit feedback, document it, analyze it, and prioritize it. So I'm excited to pass the baton off to Carolyn to talk about how we use agile principles and service design practices to shape the work ahead.
Thanks, Sam. So with the form builder launched, we looked to our roadmap to see what was next. Completing the work that was sidelined when we pivoted to the self-service tool was at the top of our list. During its development, half the team's efforts were diverted to help build an account management system. They stopped work on a secure download portal that would help users collect more sensitive private information. Again, as always, timelines are tight. We needed to balance business needs with our highest priority, which can be seen in Agile Principle number 1, which tells us our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. This principle actually helped us to deliver within the tight time frame and drive value for our public servants. We could have spent much more time researching, prototyping, testing, refining to deliver a beautifully crafted and fully mature response download portal. And that would have taken, I'd say, probably 8 to 10 months, maybe. Instead, we upheld the 12th principle of Agile, which is simplicity. The art of maximizing the work not done is essential. So instead of opting for the beautifully crafted option, we delivered an MVP response download portal in less than 4 months. We did conduct interviews and did some lightweight usability testing to better understand the workflows we needed to support. This early stage prototyping is good for identifying interface and language concerns, as can be seen in some of these user quotes. Like, when you ask me to be sure if I've downloaded them, now I'm second guessing. Have I downloaded them? And not scheduled makes me feel like I'm supposed to take action to schedule it. These user quotes show us the confusion some users faced in service flows and the language that we used. Once we completed the research, now it was time for us to make the tough calls and scope back to an MVP. By simply building only what we thought essential and then letting users direct what was to come next. We could roll out an MVP more quickly, reducing the risk of our efforts going to unwanted features. We implemented a simple table, which only really looks simple. There's actually a ton of accessibility work done behind this UI. If you didn't know, it's actually really challenging to make an accessible interactive table in HTML. So with this table, users could select and download the responses individually in an HTML file format. A few settings here and there, and a way for us to confirm our clients received their data correctly. Ta-da! That's it. Now we have a secure way to transfer form responses to our clients. Well, I mean, there's a little bit more to it than that. Being part of the Canadian government means that we have standards for bilingualism, accessibility, security, and privacy that we just can't ignore. We hold ourselves to these even in our MVP work. And security was a beast. We reviewed 159 security controls with our external auditor. And a word of advice here, start this work as early as possible. We managed to complete it without sacrificing our timelines, but not without a lot of effort and organization. With these standards in place, our MVP download response portal was done. We knew it wasn't perfect and things were missing, so we set up ways to gather feedback to understand better what was needed next. Knowing that we had ways to gather feedback and the time set aside for improvement gave us the confidence to put something out there that was less than perfect. So where is this feedback coming from? Well, demos are an excellent source of feedback. Our growth marketing specialist, Jose Jimenez, collects requests for demos through an online contact us form and spontaneous email requests. Through feedback from demos, he learned that the need for aggregated CSV downloads and the lack of API endpoints were amongst the top reasons stopping people from adopting GC forms. You can see the disappointment expressed here in one of the many quotes that Jose collected during his demos. We can't use GC forms because I am expecting over 200 responses, which my team needs to extract for analysis and processing. GC forms just wouldn't work for them. This was echoed through our support channels. Our support team helps existing users with their questions and troubleshooting. Their direct connection to our clients is so valuable. They can identify significant areas of concern, trends, and points of confusion. They found, not surprisingly, that the download feature was generating a lot of feedback. Our users were contacting us with questions like, I would like to inquire if it's possible to consolidate the responses from the GC form into a single, easily manageable file or document. And comments such as, I find responses hard to access. It feels like I have to go through multiple layers before I can access them. From this feedback, we were able to create a research brief that focused on the main areas of concern, the need for aggregated responses and better workflow integration. Embracing Agile principle number 6, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. We committed to applying design thinking to help us solve the problems ahead. We conducted several client interviews to understand their issues better, getting beyond the basic need for CSV to uncover the other issues that were contributing to an unsustainable process. Simply providing a CSV would only solve some of their problems. We had implemented a process requiring users to copy and paste confirmation codes into GC forms to confirm receipt of these responses, which was cumbersome and time-consuming. Users were also required to download and confirm their responses before they could close their form. And as a result, they needed to set time aside to be able to download and confirm everything before they hit their form's closing date. We found that the interface was unclear and clients felt that they had no control over their data, that the government was making them jump through hoops for reasons they didn't really understand. We heard things like, I suspect confirming responses has something to do with us being in the government. I've done my due diligence with this particular line item. Why do I have to confirm it? It would be nice to have more control over the response page. If you forget, too bad, bye-bye, it's gone. So taking these insights gained from these user interviews, we applied them to an opportunity canvas, a journey map, flow diagrams, and prototyping. This helped the team better focus on the user experience and make decisions by placing people at the heart of our service. All while upholding Agile principle number 4, which states, business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. I helped to facilitate discussions with policy, product management, and tech. We used the journey map and other assets to focus on the user while we worked through the risks of not requiring an active confirmation, the technical complexity of generating different formats, and how we might leverage hashing techniques to gain confidence in our outputs. It's easy to scope a piece of work based on what we're told. People want CSV outputs. But the 11th principle of Agile is that the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. And it does take an empowered team who embraces uncertainty to be this agile. We ideated on what the experience might look like when applying different techniques for passive or active acceptance of risk. And where the design might go if we didn't have technical or security limitations to consider, pushing beyond what was possible to get to concepts we might not have reached while working within a predefined box. And that's not easy. It's uncomfortable to be in that design squiggle, even for people like myself who've been through it many times and have faith in this process. It's doubly hard for folks who haven't been practicing design thinking every day for years and years. Here's a quote that I pulled from one of our team retros a week after we started this exploration. They said, "It felt like a school group project without clarity around how we were going to make a decision and what was going to be considered." So, yep, we were squarely in the middle of all that mess. We had conflicts and opposing views. I may at one point have shoved my foot in my mouth and called one of our teammates dehumanizing. And again, I'm really sorry for that. But we did talk through it, and the whole team worked through it. And with the empowering support of our leadership team, product manager Stevie Ray, delivery lead Abby, and team lead Joanna, only with their support were we able to do what needed to be done. In the end, we did gain the clarity and alignment needed to move forward with confidence. So soon, we'll have a new and improved download process that gives us confidence without making our users jump through hoops. they will get the needed CSV files without us having to sacrifice accessibility or data handling standards. So that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed my little piece of the presentation. I'm going to pass it back to Tim for our closing remarks.
Thanks, Carolyn. So yeah, what did we learn along the way? Let me just showcase a couple points to wrap things up here. And obviously it's hard to wrap things up in a couple points, but we'll go for it. So at one point, if you can speed things along for a time with manual interventions, that's okay. For example, our non-self-serve version of the form service helped prove things out before moving to self-service. It won't be perfect. Iterate. Truth is, it'll never be perfect. You got to keep gathering feedback and keep moving forward. And maximizing the work not done with an MVP and building feedback channels is essential. Listen to your users and build feedback channels. These could be via support requests, setting up demo days, or targeted research sessions. Figure out what works for your team and do that. And thanks for listening to our journey. We'll now take some time for questions.
Wow, thank you all for that wonderful presentation. I love your iterative process and your celebration of your team. It's clear your team culture really comes through in your presentation. Folks, please keep the questions coming. I'm going to start by reading some of the questions that were submitted in chat previously, but please feel free to add more. We have about 25 minutes for questions, so it's a great end of the hour here. So first up, Melissa Gearnoth asked, how do these forms and process conform with WCAG 2.1? Jose Jimenez, who's here from CDS in the chat, responded to learn more about the work we're doing to make GC forms accessible in our blog. How we're building GC forms are 4 accessible approaches. I didn't know if anyone on the call wanted to also add any more detail to that.
I can give just kind of a brief explanation. For accessibility, we do aim for WCAG 2.0 AA. Our external public-facing forms are 100% compliant. We haven't had the audit done on our internal interface yet, but it is one of our benchmarks. We also leverage Fable to do accessibility testing with real people using real screen readers and assistive technologies to help understand some of the more complex accessibility issues for our users.
Thank you. Next up, Nancy Manduano asked, when was this implemented?
That's a good question. Because we practice continuous deployment, the form builder went live on August 24th this summer, I believe. And the response download portal just a couple months ago went live. So we're just trying to keep things moving.
Wonderful. Next up, Daniel Knob asked what schema or libraries were used in the original JSON implementation. Tim responded with a link to the schema. Tim, did you want to add any more on the schema?
Yeah, there's not much there. There's a link to the schema. We're just using like it's called JSON schema. We're just using the NPM library for that and just doing like validation. We don't allow like HTML markup and stuff to come through, anything like that. But yeah, the key here is for us, the next step is building in the conditional logic and seeing that's not built into the schema yet. So the trick is going to be building that into the schema and keeping things backwards compatible.
Nice. A related question, John Dunning asked about what the front end is built in. You had responded React and Next.js, but anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, so yeah, React Next.js, and that is the front end, back end. We have the API layer, everything running through there, and then we use like a Postgres database and AWS services and Prisma as a ORM.
Thank you. Next up, Nehemiah Darces asks, when exporting, are you exporting the form or the entries?
For our export function on the form builder, currently it's exporting the form content, but we are working on exporting the form entries as well. So that is a feature that we are looking to provide outward soon.
And then another question from Daniel Knob. How much did data handling or other compliance concerns impact the project?
I don't know that I would say impact the project. They're part of the work that we do, and always working with our policy analysts to understand those and understand how we can work with those constraints. I mean, there are some things that we need to support, and we understand that, and they do in the end have, as you saw, some impact on user experience that can be a bit wonky or jarring, and it feels this is just government-y. But we're aiming to make it feel as natural as possible. I don't know if that answered that correctly. You can add some more if you're looking for specific pieces.
Great, thanks, Carolyn. Next up, Kelly C. asked, how are your forms being used now? Who are the users? And is there an example or case study of it being used?
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
How are the forms being used now? Who are the users? And is there an example or case study of it being used?
I wish I had, CVA has this great dashboard that shows you here's the 80 some odd departments who are now using GC forms and however many forms and responses we have coming in. I don't have those statistics right off the bat, but right now, GC Forms is limited to very simple forms. There's, as you saw, just checkboxes, radio buttons, inputs, just the basic stuff. So that doesn't work when you're talking about, more complex forms where you need that conditional logic. That's next on our roadmap coming up, is how we're going to be able to support that conditional logic in an accessible, bilingual way. But so yeah, we're limited. We can collect protected information now, which has opened it up to a lot of users across government. I mean, when you need to ask for somebody's contact information and a couple other things, you're already into protected information. And so that has opened the door. If you've got a simple form, you can now collect responses for it. Yeah, user base is growing steadily.
Yeah, maybe just to add on to it, with a specific use case, we obviously have registration forms to renew licenses. I think we have one live with RCMP to renew your firearms license. But our first protected B form, which I might appeal to the audience, would be for creating a consent form to do research with the public. So that's our first protected B use case.
Nice. And just for the records, Jose dropped a great blog post in here about more about how the forms are helping people collect data on public services, and we'll make sure that that link is available in the wrap-up materials as well. Next question is from Carla Schulte. What does the review or publishing process look like? Is there a limited staff who can review and publish forms to ensure standards and compliance are maintained?
Yeah, so that's basically where I was talking about the low-tech solution, and we're still there. So essentially, it's folks passing around JSON files back and forth. It's not great, but it works. Probably at some point in time, we'll look towards creating a more advanced workflow and creating like teams within the app and those sorts of things. But it's just trying to divvy up sort of what work gets done now, what gets done later. So yeah, that's where we're at. Interestingly, with because it's all a JSON format, something I would note is that it's been really helpful for support requests. So if people are having issues with their forms, they can quickly download their JSON, and then support can pick it up, and then we can import and see exactly what state their form is in. So on that end, it's been really helpful. But yeah, it's totally low tech right now.
Great.
I can add to that as well, just from a process perspective. When someone wants to publish forms, we require only that they, to sign up for an account, you just have to have a Government of Canada email address. You'll need permission to publish, and that is also self-service. So you need to provide your manager's contact information and a couple of other little questions, which unlocks publishing. We don't actually do any intervention to make sure your form is, fantastically designed. We leave that to the departments. It's a self-service solution. A lot of the people using the product right now are actually forms teams who create forms for their department, so they know a lot about it anyway. And then we baked in some mandatory items that are required for good form design, like that confirmation message, like a privacy statement. And we're able to give people a little bit more guidance on what goes into these things and why they're important.
Great. Next up, a question from Karen Coronel. What was the outreach process to adopt users to new forms?
I wish we had Jose on the call to answer this one, because he has a whole growth chart on how we're rolling this out. We rolled it out first to just our friendly CDS folks, then we expanded to a select group of people who we considered like friendlies outside of our department. Then from there, we rolled it out to like a private beta and grew it so that as our reach grew, we were able to have confidence that we wouldn't run into issues that might compromise our visual integrity, our reputation. So just having that slow rollout where we're gaining momentum, I think momentum is really going to start picking up over the next year, because the product is becoming more mature. We're getting to the point where we have almost enough features to say that it's a mature product that can be used for like a good selection of government users.
Jose says you covered it, Carolyn. We have big plans, and is dropping some more information that we'll also make sure is available afterwards. Next up, two related questions asked by Yale Weinreich and Tristan Bennick about how did you decide on build versus buy, or looking also at like existing products or free tools, things like Google Forms.
I think I can highlight the one main aspect of why we decided to build, which was how we handle protected B information and making sure that our tool hits our access, our ATIP, our security compliance checkboxes to handle, to encrypt that data, hold it for a period of time, and then be able to release it in a safe manner for users. So I think that is one of the main pieces. There are a few tools that have bilingual interfaces and interventions to help you add another language, but that was another piece that we didn't have an option to buy. There is a lot more information to this, so this is something we can also share out from our product manager about the analysis that's been done of why we decided to build and not buy.
Thank you. I think that's a critical question that everyone is facing all the time, and what it costs to build versus buy as well. Maybe a somewhat related question from Colin MacArthur about were there other services that inspired you in kind of the design and development process as well?
Hey, Colin. Oh my God. Yeah. So we looked at a lot of form builders. I think the main few that we got like the form building interface from would definitely be tally.so and Google Forms, as well as the Singapore form building product that they have out. And we did try to look for some of the GovUK form building blogs that had generously given us some screenshots as some inspiration for the form, how they chunked out their form cards. So there is, we looked at a lot of form builders as well as survey builders across the board to see how people were specifically architecting their information across the app.
Thank you. Next up from Kritika Mathur Prasad, is this something your team will continually build, iterate, and maintain?
Yeah, I think we have a giant roadmap in front of us. As Joe jokingly, something that I think we have like 10 years worth of work to do.
Great. Next from Tiffany Zhu, when creating the original WYSIWYG, how did you teach people about good UX? Looking at the tool, for example, do users know what questions you might use the checkbox selection for with, for example, or the flip side, are you encouraging people to use /hack forms any way they would like?
I think good form guidance is on our roadmap. So to look at intentionally, specifically, a little bit further down the line, we were able to sprinkle in a little bit of content design to let users know that this is not checkboxes, this is multi-select, this is a single option, and using some tips along the way, visual tips of how they can use that. And I think we also have our templates to help us out as well. So I would say that the app currently doesn't have form building guidance, but we have built in some interventions to ensure that you have an ending, a confirmation page, a title, a description, you have your privacy statement for the government of Canada, and then to help people choose their form input based on what they're hoping the interaction will be. But there's more to do there for sure.
Something I could add there is we have originally we started with like just a drop down like beside the actual form element, and you would just pick if you want like a select item or radio or whatever. No descriptions there, and we ended up moving to what we call like an add element dialog. So you click like an add button, and then it pops up in a modal, and then we give like a description of each form element. So there's still room there to iterate, but it does, like having that dialogue does give us a lot more room to tell the users what they're going to be inserting.
Thank you. Next, Kritika Mathur Prasad, are there any change management challenges that you anticipate and plan for, and any strategies to share?
We haven't faced any challenges. I think this is one of those things where we're like, if the tool works for you, please use the tool. We want to help small teams make some simple forms to begin. We do require you to have your manager's email address to publish. That might be the only piece that can cause some back and forth, as well as the collaboration piece. But we haven't hit that level of bureaucracy, I would say, with our tool yet. But we'll see.
I will say that not requiring people to have an account in order to get in and play around with the product was, I would say, like a huge win for us, but also like it flipped, it blew people's minds really, because not needing an account to do something in government was, it was very different. And it did cause, some confusion. Right? What do you mean I don't need an account? What do you mean I don't need permission to build a form? Yeah, you can go in there. Anybody here can go in, use the product, build a form, download that schema. You just can't publish it. So it opens up the realm of possibility where you could have potentially a really talented form builder build something for you, give you the schema, and you can upload it, working in different ways than what we're maybe used to in government.
That's great. And Jose just dropped a link in the chat to actually be able to explore GC Forms yourself. So we'll make sure that's included as well. Technical question from Randy Abramson. What is powering your autocomplete feature for addresses, etc.?
Yeah, so we don't actually have any code specifically for autocomplete. That's just like browser autocompletes.
Just looks slick in the demo, huh? Cool. Ross Ferguson asked a question about, could you open your roadmap so that other teams can follow along and spot things that they might like to collaborate on? A few responses in chat, but wanted to open up Carolyn or others if you wanted to share about the plans with that roadmap.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of people ask for a roadmap. Like, when are those features coming? We do have a sign-up form for if you want to be notified when releases happen, so you can see in real time when things are being released. So you're welcome to sign up for that if you're interested. As well, like the roadmap we have right now that we're working towards publishing, I'm not sure when and how and when that's going to go live. But if you go to our information page and keep an eye on that, it will turn up there in some way, shape, or form at some point in the near future.
Excellent. Well, we're just about at time, and I don't see any other questions in the queue, so I'm going to go ahead and close us out. Thank you so much for everyone for joining today's session, and special thank you to Carolyn, Sam, and Tim for sharing their time and expertise with us.